We'd like to kick off again. People enjoying themselves next door. And introduce to you Anna Mansi from the British Film Institute. Anna is, I think, something of a guru, I've been told. That's the word that's been used on the tax credit system, which obviously for filmmakers is hugely important. I'm sure she'll probably get lots of questions. So please welcome to the stage, Anna.
Thank you. I don't think I need that. Can everyone hear me? I've got a mic on, so I don't... Okay, thank you very much. I don't know who's described me as a guru. I certainly wouldn't describe myself as one. I'm just going to do a very quick run-through on the creative sector tax relief. So I'm the head of certification at the BFI. I'm not the person that was mentioned earlier about that knows everyone. So funding isn't my area, but tax relief it is, and it is essentially free money. So is everyone aware of the creative sector tax reliefs? Can you put your hands up? Great. And you've used them, accessed them, found them okay? Right. And do we have some, can I just get an idea of who's in there? Have we got animation people, video games developers? Great, fantastic. Film, we know we've got quite a few film. High-end television? Yeah, I didn't think we'd have high-end television. So what I'm going to do is give you a very brief run-through, because I know that you're a bit behind time. So this is going to be a very brief overview, but if you want to talk to me, I'll be here for lunch this afternoon. I've also left some of our leaflets, which are on the desk just outside, because normally I would do a presentation on one specific area of the one specific sector, and I'm doing a very quick one on all 5 sectors. But there's a lot of similarities. They're all based on the original film tax relief that was introduced in 2007. So the government has creative sector tax relief for film, high-end television programmes, animation television programmes, children's television programmes and video games. There's a specific tax relief for each sector. They're all worth the same amount, and they all have very similar criteria for how you can qualify for them. We are the first, my department, the certification unit, is the first point of contact to access the relief, and you have to pass a cultural test or qualify as an official co-production, which is why we do a lot of the promotion around how you qualify and what they're actually worth. So why do you want to qualify as British? To access the tax relief, it's free money, essentially. If you're making a film in the UK, or even if you're making a film like the director yourself, sorry, you're looking to do a project in Japan, but I presume you'd want to do all your post-production here. You'd want to access the benefits that you can get on the work that you actually do in the UK. You won't be able to access the tax relief on the work that you're doing in Japan. But if you are making creative projects in the UK, and you are a UK developer or producer of TV or film content, you can get tax relief on any money that is used or consumed in the UK. The government is incentivising you because it adds value to the economy, it adds value through the creative projects you're doing, and it creates jobs. You can help get financing against the tax reliefs. So if you need to build your tax relief into your finance plan, for example, so the way the tax relief works is you have to incur the expenditure before you can claim it, but you can actually do that during production or development. So if you do your principal photography and you want to claim on what you've spent so far, as long as you've got your cultural test certificate from us, then you can claim on that expenditure that you've incurred to date, or you can just wait and go straight to the end. But if you want to build that, if you can work out how much you would get in your tax relief based against your budget, and you want to build that into your finance plan, there are financiers and lenders who will lend against that, and so you can put it into your finance plan in advance. They will generally tend to lend only sort of 95%, something like that, and obviously there'll be a cost incurred, but actually for some of you it might work out to be a good deal. On the film and television side, it can help if your project is British or cult certified as British, as we would say, in terms of distribution, in terms of you getting distributed in other territories. And then it can be a requirement for lottery funds. So for BFI, if you're applying for BFI lottery funding, some of the Creative England programmes, you may need to be actually officially British. They need to know that you're going for the tax relief. Certainly for Creative Europe and other regional funds as well. And equally for festivals. Some festivals will want to see that you are a British project, whether it's a film or television. So the qualifying criteria for, I'm going to sort of flick between, there's 2 slides here. So we've got the 5 tax reliefs: film, high-end television, animation and children's. The video games I forgot to put on here, but it is very similar to the sort of animation side. So across all of the 5 reliefs, you have to have either a film production company, a television production company, or a video games development company that is set up before development or production begins. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you. It's not about worrying about how many points you can get in a cultural test. It's about the company being set up before development or production begins, and that company being responsible throughout that development until completion. The reason why I'm stressing this so much is that's the thing that will trip you up. If you don't set up the company till the middle of development, HMRC won't pay out the tax relief. Everything else, if you're a UK developer or producer, you will pass the criteria. It's just make sure your company is set up. It needs to be set up within the UK corporation tax net, and that's at Companies House. It can cost anything, as far as I'm aware, it's less than 100 quid. It could be less than 50 quid. I'm sure some of you have done this already anyway. And it only takes about 48 hours to actually set it up. So you've got the company. You must be spending at least 10% of your core expenditure in the UK. Now, that applies for all the film and television tax reliefs. But for the video games one, it's 25%, but that's 25% in the UK or Europe. I don't have time to explain why it's 25% or why it's UK or Europe in video games. But for all the other ones, it's a minimum of 10%, which is why your project, where if you're filming outside, you're doing post here, it used to be 25% for film, but they lowered it for those types of project where you do need to film outside of the UK. For film, it has to be intended for theatrical release, and it's about the intention. So if you're making a short film, for example, and you've got it into a festival and people have to go and pay to see it at the festival, you can claim that counts as theatrical release. Even if you don't get a distribution deal, as long as you can demonstrate that you're actively seeking to get a distribution deal, that demonstrates the intention. For all of the TV tax relief, so high-end animation and children's, it must be intended for broadcast. Generally, that's much more straightforward. You tend to have a commissioning agreement in place at an early stage before you're going ahead with making the production. And the intention for broadcast does include the internet. So any deals now with S4, any of the Netflix, Hulu, any of them, that counts for all the tax reliefs for television. It has to qualify as British, which is where we come in, and we're the first point of contact. You can either qualify as British under our cultural test, and there's an individual cultural test, which is in the little leaflet, for each of the different tax reliefs. They're all very similar. There are slight nuances between them to accommodate the different sectors and different creative roles, for example, between games and television and animation. Specifically, there's no one for high-end television here, so I'm not really going to, basically, that you've got to be spending a huge amount of money if you want to make a high-end television drama. It's for the it's set the bar for Game of Thrones, Downton Abbey. So have you got a question?
Yeah. Does it apply to factual as well as drama?
Yes, so for film, that's factual film, that's that's documentary film, that's animation film, comedy, any type of film, short film, big film. So inward investment, tiny short film as well. For high-end television, it's comedy, drama, documentary. And then for animation television, the minimum criteria is that you have to spend at least 51% of the expenditure has to be on animation activity. So things that you have to make the animation. There is no age limit with animation, so you can have adult animation, and by that I don't mean pornographic animation, I mean animation for adults. The reason why is because 95% of animation is CBBS kind of content. The children's television one is for mixed content, and there is an age threshold, so it has to be for commissioned under 15. Although I think the BBC now there's a bit of a sticking point with that, because since it's been introduced, the BBC is now introducing under 16 content. But generally, we can see that it is aimed at an under 16-year-old audience. Sorry, I'm conscious of the time here. So the cultural test. As you can see, it's very similar. I've just really condensed this down. You'll see in the leaflet there's one for each application, for each sector. The film, high and television, and children's television, you need to get 18 out of a possible 35 points to pass. It's really easy. It's broken down into cultural content, what you're seeing on screen. Is it set in the UK or Europe? Are the characters British or European? Is the story British or European? Or is it the underlying material, for example? And is it in the English language or one of our recognised regional languages or British Sign Language? Cultural contribution, is it adding value through British creativity, British heritage or diversity? And that's not limited to being British, and that's on screen or off screen. And then cultural hubs, where you're actually doing the activity anywhere in the UK, and cultural practitioners, British or European. Now, post-Brexit, I don't know what will happen there, but I think we would want to keep all the European elements that we do have in our cultural tests, because it will actually still enhance the projects that we have. It used to be, when the film test first came in 2007, the cultural content section was just about British scene, British characters, and we changed it to add more value by making it European and making us more competitive with our other European partners who also have to have cultural tests as well, and they had European content, so we wouldn't want to take that away. And the government has committed, saying that they want to make sure the creative sector, they realise the importance of the tax reliefs to people like yourselves who are making content and how valuable they are. Again, with the animation, video games, cultural tests, exactly the same principle, but the pass mark is 16 out of 31 points. Essentially, you can see you can pass the test in section A alone on content. So something like Paddington will pass on just the content. You don't have to worry about getting points in other sections. But if you had something, so let's say you're making a video game of West Side Story, which is obviously set in the US, but the underlying material is Romeo and Juliet. So you'd get points for underlying material despite not getting setting and characters, because they're all American. So there's a tendency, particularly with some video games where developers will look at it and think, oh, I can't pass this, I've got to put a phone box in my game. You really don't have to do that. As I say, we've got lots of projects where there's set in other countries, set in other worlds, and actually animation kids and video games will have an extra section where if you've got a game or a television program that's set in another world, you get points for that. Film and high-end telly don't have that, and they would love to have it. So basically, you will always be able to pass the test, and we're always available to help you and advise you how you can get points, or maybe you haven't thought about there's some area that there's points you would get, and we can tell you that. Lastly, I'm quickly going to touch on co-production. So cultural test is one way of passing, is qualifying as British. That's where it's one company, as explained, you're responsible from beginning through to completion. That doesn't mean you can't subcontract other companies to help you do work. So if you want to subcontract some visual effects work, etc., it just means that the company has to be the main one from pre-production through to completion, or pre-development through to completion. The other way of qualifying as British is to do it as an official co-production. Now, we have 12 bilateral treaties with other countries. They're all listed up here. They're all for film. We also have seven of those treaties allow television as well. There is a separate UK-China television treaty that's recently been signed. You cannot do video games under the co-production. There's no video games co-production treaties. And I can't see them having them in the future. But you can just do the video games under the cultural test. The basic principles of doing co-production is you're sharing the goods and services, you're sharing the risk. It gives you an opportunity to maybe promote the project in another territory, because it will be recognised as, for example, a UK and a Canadian project. So it'll be a national film in Canada as well as the UK if you do it under that treaty. then you'll be able to access, the Canadian co-producer will be able to access benefits in their country. So the equivalent of the BFI Film Fund, they'll be able to maybe access funding from telefilm and the Canadian incentives. And it will also help distribution because you'll get more territories if it's recognised in Canada on the American side, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about working together and jointly making the project. You're sharing the risk. The basic principles are that each of the co-producing countries has to put in an amount of finance. So a minimum 20, generally the rules are across all of the treaties more or less the same. It's a bit like the cultural test. They're based on the same framework, but there are nuances depending on the countries. But generally the rules are 20% minimum financial contribution, 80% maximum, so you can have anything between them. The only one that's different is UK-Australia, which was signed in the 90s and for some reason is now at 30% and 70%. We've both been trying to change it for years and we still haven't got round to it. We don't know why it's set at that. So if you're putting in some financial contribution, that your creative spend or filmmaking contribution should be broadly in proportion to the financial contribution. So, for example, if we're doing a 40% contribution on the UK side, 60% in Canada. Canada's doing the principal photography. They've got the director and writer. We're doing all the post and the music and maybe a couple of days shooting. And we would expect our spend to be around the 35 to 45% mark because it's broadly in proportion to the financial contribution. You are allowed to have some elements that aren't from the UK or Canada, such as maybe you need a US staff for the script reasons or financing reasons because it's going to help the project. But there's a limit to how much you can have because the principle is you're meant to be using the goods and services of those two countries that are making the project. And finally, this is probably the most important bit, what's it actually worth? So, as I've said, across all of the cultural test projects, the value of the tax relief is exactly the same with the it's 25% of the core expenditure, but it's capped at 80%. So in this example, where you have a £1 million budget, the core expenditure is actually 850,000. What we mean by core expenditure is that all the activity, all the money you're spending on goods and services to make that project. Non-core is things like wrap parties, financing fees, legal fees, that kind of stuff, debugging on the game side. So that should be at 800,000, not 850,000. So we've taken out, so it's a £1 million budget. You've got 850,000 is used or consumed, 800,000 is used or consumed in the UK. You are only allowed to claim on 800,000 because it's capped at 80%. It's a completely UK project. The rate is 25%, so ultimately you would end up with £200,000 back in tax relief. Now, as I say, you can either apply during production, once you're incurring it, and claim it back during the project, or you can wait till the end and do it at the end, or you can get it cash flowed in advance. On co-production, it's slightly different. The 80% cap is only on the UK expenditure. So as you can see, you'll end up with 120,000 on the similar sort of figures. So it's less, but then the reason why, or as HMRC defines it, is because you're getting the benefit of the other co-producer in Canada, for example. They'll be accessing tax reliefs on their side as well. So that's how they see the balance working.
I've been through this process where it's always been the plan to go through this process. I'm just curious, can you take this approach after something's been produced already?
Yes, so there's a limit to claim. So you can apply, as I say, you can apply for interim at any stage during production, or you can wait and just go for final. We tend to find most on the film and TV side that people will apply at the interim stage because financiers want to see the certificate these days. However, yes, you can claim after you complete a film as long as it's not out. I think there's a 2 or 3 year date post the completion date.
You still have to go back and do the cultural test.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's not too much of, I don't think I've got, yeah, that's the end. It's not too much of a laborious process. It's an online application form. You do have to have the form sworn under oath because it's in legislation. We tend to take 4 to 6 weeks to process it. If it's a straightforward project where it's all, you know, like a Paddington points kind of thing, where it's all 18 in A, then it'll probably be a bit quicker. I mean, there's 10 of it. We've gone from a team of 3 to a team of 10 in the last 3 or 4 years just because of the volume of work we're getting in. But yeah, it is quite straightforward. You then get the certificate and you put your claim in to HMRC. And we're always there to talk you through it and say, there's a tendency with some people to go for as many points as possible, and it's like, don't, because in some scenarios, you may have to get, if you're claiming points for in section C and D, you may have to get an accountant's report to verify them. So we try and encourage you to just like only go for this one or that one, so there's less cost for you. I mean, normally I'd do a bigger thing where we go into more detail so you can see that. But yeah, we're always happy to help and talk you through it or meet people.
Sorry, just one.
That's okay.
Just going back to the short film.
Yes.
Intention for theatrical release. You were
Yeah.
suggesting just an entry into a film festival.
Yeah, because I fought a lot with HMRC over this, because if you're getting a release at a film festival, you still have an audience paying to go and see that, unless you're putting it on for free, and then that would be a bit. But if they've accepted now, if it's going in a festival, and short film's slightly different, and we do want to encourage people to use it. It may be that you look at the costs of it and get an accountant doing your tax return. It might not work out, but we've had quite a few short films through now. But it is literally the same rate of relief for a short film and to the big Americans that are coming over and doing Pinewood as well. This tax relief is for everyone.
Well, thank you.
That's me, I'm done. Sorry, that was really, really quick run through, but I'm going to be here if anyone wants to talk to me about the project. Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Anna. What I would pick up on from that was one phrase: free money. Filmmakers love that. So, in all seriousness, really important this. So if you are in the process of doing that or planning, I would have a word with Anna, perhaps during lunch,